folks, Troy with V-Twins to V8s. I'm back here to do another project. Got kind of a cool one this time. I got this old Ford F100, and it's pretty slick. It's got a lot of modifications on it, including a small block Ford and a Paxton supercharger or a Pro Charger, whatever you want to call it. And what we're going to do on this project is we're going to convert this truck from a carburetor to a EFI system. We're going to use Holley Sniper EFI. So I'm going to lay out the parts, I'll show you what's in it, and we'll get to it. Alright folks, so I laid out everything that comes in the kit. We'll go right through it. First, you got the throttle body that goes on top of the engine. This mimics the carburetor. It's got the ECM is inside. The computer module is right inside of this unit here. You get another box with all the wiring you need and all the sensors that you need for the system. In addition to that, we've got some optional things that I like. We have the dual sync distributor and the Hyperspark box. Now what this does, it allows, if you install the distributor and the box in conjunction with the sniper unit, the sniper will control the ignition timing. This is a really, really great setup because what it will allow is advancing or retarding the timing to whatever situation you may be under. What I really like is I did it on the 67 Charger project, and the Charger had an automatic transmission with not much stall in the converter and a pretty good sized cam in it, and it was amazing. It smoothed that cam right out at idle in gear. You put your foot on the brake with it in gear, it would idle at 800 RPM with the AC on, and just nice and smooth. Still had a great sound to it. It just really made the car drivable. Now with our project vehicle that we got here, it's got a supercharger on it, a belt-driven supercharger that blows through the top of this. So things are going to change very radically. In other words, you start force feeding air and fuel into the engine, you're going to want to do things with the timing. You're going to, if it's really hot out, you maybe want to draw some timing back out of it, things of that nature. So this is a really, really a great way to have optimum timing at all times, prevent detonation, and get the maximum amount of performance. So here's our setup in a nutshell. I also have an in-tank fuel pump that's going to go in the fuel cell that's in the back of this truck. We're going to cut that, we'll drop that in, and then our fuel pump will be inside the tank, not on the frame rail. And we also won't have to run a return line all the way back from the throttle body all the way back to the tank. So with the in-tank unit from Holley, you run one fuel line and it takes care of everything for you. You know, it just simplifies things. Plus the fuel pump is in the tank, and you don't hear it as much. I just think it's a nice cleaner setup. You look underneath the car, all you see is fuel lines. You know, your fuel pump goes on top of the tank. You don't see that. I just think it's a super slick setup. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our project here prepped up. I'm going to put it on the lift. I'm going to pull the hood off. I'm going to take a few things off of the vehicle to make it nice and easy for access to get into the vehicle and start installing all these things. So let me get it set up. We'll come back on and we'll start in the back with doing the in-tank fuel pump. So let's get at it. Alright folks, so I took the liberty of getting the hood off of the vehicle. I got it up on the lift. I've removed my fuel lines. I removed this fuel cell. This goes up underneath the back of the vehicle. Somebody had retrofitted this in, and I took a look at it, and this is what I've got. I'm going to show you the top of it here. So what we have here is we have the sending unit that tells us our fuel level. This is the fill spigot to put your gas in the vehicle. And this area that I marked out is going to be where we put our submersible fuel pump that comes from Holley. So this is your in-tank fuel pump. It requires a 3¼ inch hole for it to go in. And this particular bottom side of this fuel pump, you'll see it has all of these ears on it. And this diameter, this circumference right here is your 3¼ inch. It's got this big foam area here that you can that will seal it to the tank. So once we make our hole, we'll loosen up these Allen screws here, and then drop this in the tank, these ears will fold out. They'll grab the inside of the tank and squeeze this gasket to the tank and seal it. Okay, once we have that figured out, once we have that fitted anyways, we make our hole. We put this in here like this. Then we have to set our height where our fuel pump sits on the bottom of the tank. So we're going to be working on that next, but right now I'm going to talk to you about making this hole. So what I did here was I took a look at this tank and I looked at where I would have room up on the inside above the tank where it mounts. There's a couple of ribs on the bed that run right here. This center area is pretty well open, so I decided to put it right here in the center. I've got plenty of room. I measured this out. I got it centered where I like it, in the center of the tank this way, and between my filler and here, I'm way away from my sending unit, so I don't have to worry about my float for my sending unit anyway being interfered with by the fuel pump. The other thing that's nice about me having my fuel pump way over here like this is this particular fuel cell has a sump in it, so we'll be able to utilize a little bit of that. That'll give us a low point in the tank for the fuel, and that will be good as well. So what I did was I marked this out. It's a 3 1/4 inch hole, and to just give you one of my famous little tricks, what I did figure out is, I'm a body guy if you watched any of my stuff, a empty roll of masking tape. This is a 2 1/2 inch tape, 2 inch tape rather, but an empty roll is 3 1/4 inches on the outside. So once I got this all centered and centered and measured out, I was able to just set this on here, trace my hole, and there we go. Now I got an exact hole for my exact pattern for drilling this out. Now, they recommend you have a 3 1/4 inch hole saw. I don't have one. I don't know who does. I have hole saws for making holes, but I don't have anything quite that big, and not for metal anyways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a series of holes, and I'm going to take a reciprocating metal saw, and I'm going to cut this out, and then once I get that done, I'll clean it all up, and we'll clean the tank out, and I'll show you how I do it. Alright folks, so now I'm getting ready to make my hole in my tank here. What I've done is I'm going to drill a series of 3/8 holes so I can get my reciprocating saw in here to make my holes. So I put down 3 1/8 pilot holes. I'm going to drill 3 3/8 holes so I can drop my blade in, and we're going to get at cutting this hole. So I'll just work my way along. So now what I have is I have a spot here that is big enough for my blade for my saw to fit in. I'll walk this saw right around here, and I'll cut this as a nice circular hole. So I'm going to do that off the camera. I don't really think you want to listen to this going on, and I'll show you what we got after we're done. So I've returned. Now what I've done is I've gone ahead, drilled multiple holes in here, and then I took my reciprocating saw and I followed the pattern that I made with my little tape thing. As you can see, it's pretty much exactly what I got. So now my new pump will drop right in there. So after I got this cut, what I did was I took a file and I dressed this off so it's nice and smooth here on the inside. Then I took the sender out, took the foam out of the inside of it, as you should have beforehand anyways, but I had everything out of the inside of it. I brought this thing out and I rinsed the whole inside of it to get all of the chips and everything out of there, cleaned it up nice, took the blowgun, blew it all out, got a rag in there, dried it all out and everything, so it's nice and clean on the inside. I put my sending unit back in. There was actually a problem with my sending unit. The float had fallen off of it. I don't know when that happened, but I put it back on. I tested the sending unit. It's good. I got it back in there. It's operational. So now the next step in the process is going to be to get our fuel pump over here, set our fuel pump height into the bottom of our sump here, and get it bolted together. And then we'll be ready to put the tank back in and get the fuel line plumbed and stuff like that. So I'm going to grab the fuel pump and we'll get that set up in here next. Okay, so now that I got my tank cleaned and everything's ready to go, this is all dressed off. I got my sender unit all in there and functioning. I put all my other caps back on. I put a little Teflon tape just to make sure everything's right. Now we're going to set up our in-tank unit here. I had showed you this in the past where it has these ears and it drops down onto here, and then these ears pop out and then squeeze this gasket against the tank. So what we have to do is we have to cut this line right here so that it sets our fuel pump height correctly on the bottom. So what our instructions are telling us is to measure the distance from the top of the tank to the bottom of the tank and then subtract 7 inches from it. So my tank is 11 inches deep, so I put my tape measure down in here and I figured where I wanted it to have, and I said, okay, I want it around 11 inches. I got to subtract 7, so that's going to give me 4 inches. So what I want to do is I want to take and mark this and remove 4 inches, cut my hose so my hose is 4 inches. I always like to put a piece of tape on everything that I cut because I'm just a freak like that. So I know that this is going to go right here. I'm going to put a little piece of tape right on there so that I know exactly where my cut's going to be. And then I got this handy dandy little knifey thing. And I'm going to cut this with this. Now I've got a nice even cut. And my hose should be 4 inches, which it is. Okay, so now once I have my height set like that, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to need to put this bracket onto my fuel pump here. I'm going to take and bolt this on. Then my fuel pump is going to press down on there, and I'm going to put a clamp on here, and I'm going to have this little filter pad that's going to go on there. What this does is it kind of soaks up a bunch of fuel, and it makes it so if you drive around and you wing around, it doesn't, the fuel pump doesn't cavitate, doesn't suck air. So this is really important. Make sure you put that on there. So I'm going to go ahead and put this other piece on here right now. Make sure that my my height is going to be okay with this on there. Okay, so now I've got my bracket mounted on here, and I just kind of position my cut hose and my fuel pump right adjacent to the fitting, and I notice that my top of my fuel pump is going to be higher than my bracket. So I want to trim my bracket so that it's not going to impede my little filter thing. So I'm going to trim this back to about this notch here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little piece of tape on this so I know where I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to trim this off, and then we'll mount this. We'll mount it with our hose clamps, and then we'll mount our little filtery thing, and in the tank we'll go. Okay, so now what I've done is I've trimmed this bracket that mounts my pump. I've trimmed that off, and I took a file, I smoothed the edges off. Now I'm going to go ahead and mount my pump. So the first thing I want to do is I got a little tiny clamp that goes onto this hose. I locate it so I can actually be able to get at it once it's on here. And then in the very bottom of this thing here, you'll be able to see where the inlet piece kind of pokes its way up. I'm going to mount this hose. I'm going to mount the hose onto here. So, like this. Now I got it turned so I have access to my clamp. And then this is sitting on here nicely. I'm going to work on tightening up this clamp right now. So now I got my little clamp on there. I gave you a little picture there. Now on the back side of this bracket that holds the pump, there's a groove. So what I do is I take and I put my wires inside of that groove to protect them and hold them out of the way. So I did that, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my clamp, or should I say clamps with an S, down over the top of this so that it will hold my, my fuel pump to the bracket and keep my wires nice and neat and out of the way. I position my clamp like this here so that it will have good clearance when it goes into the into this hole that I have. I always like to split my clamp so one screws in one direction, one in the other. I don't really know why, but I've just always done that. So this is going to be how it looks. Again, not another thing that needs to be like crazy tight, because this has a little foam insulator around the outside edge of it, which is nice, so the clamp actually kind of sinks into it a little bit, and then it stops the clamp from being able to slide. This is why I shut the camera off a lot of times, because nobody really wants to watch me turn a screw for a half an hour. Make sure that, yeah, so you want to make sure it's snug. You want to make sure that your wires aren't going to go anywhere. You also want to make sure your wires really aren't pinched. This looks really good. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this top off. I'm going to take my handy dandy little thing out, and I'm going to install this. This is pretty slick, actually. So this is going to slide right over this opening and push down onto that other piece. This is the piece that the thing I was telling you about. Basically what it does, it's like a little filter to make sure it doesn't pick up any crap in the pump, but it also is kind of saturates with fuel, so you don't have to worry about the fuel pump, you know, cavitating when you turn a sharp corner and it runs out of gas or something like that. So I'm going to pop that on there, and then we'll be ready to put this right in the tank. Before I pop this on here, I just want to do a quick trial fit to make sure that my initial idea is going to work. Which, look at that. That is like New York City, baby. It's right where I want it to be. Let's put our pad on, and we'll get a good look, and we'll see what we end up with in the end. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So it looks like I got a good 9.5 inches. My tank's 11 inches deep, but my tank's 11 inches deep in this sump down here in the bottom. So this should be perfect. Absolutely perfect down in here like that. Alright, now the next thing I'm going to want to do is take my Allen wrenches and loosen up these bolts that are in the top. I'll turn my ears and get this located. The thing I really like about this whole setup right here is that this thing just drops down into the hole, and even once you get these started, you'll be able to take and relocate the position of your piece. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take back these all off. Enough so when you push it down, this piece will go and swing out like this and grab a hold of your tank. So we got to get them all loosened up first. Whoever came up with this was really thinking. I really like the thought process of it, because once you have this thing loosened up and it's in the hole, you can clock it any way you like. I'm just going to have mine. So as you can see, you've got all these little ears that are like that. Once you get it in here, then you can pick up on this and turn it outwards, and then when you tighten it up, it'll squeeze it. So I'm going to put my baffling back in this tank right now. The liberty of cleaning all this stuff up really good. Now I got to get it back in here and get it in a good position. I'm kind of lucky because apparently my when I close my hand up, I can fit it in a 3 1/4 inch hole. It's not a lot of people know that. All right. So I got my baffling in there. That stops my gas from sloshing around. I've got my piece right here like this. Get all my little ears so they're going in where I want them to be. Once you get it in there, it can be a little tricky. I got one Renegade. There we go. Alright, so now I just clock this thing where I want it. And I want to come off of this on a 90 degree, I do believe anyways. And if I pick up on this, this is just going to come right down where I want it to be. Alright, now I'm going to go like if you're tightening a tire, so I'll go directly across, find that one, and do the same process. Go. I'm just going to continue from there. I'm going to come back over to this guy, and I'm just going to keep crisscrossing my way around, tightening this up. I'm not getting super snug right now. I'm just trying to get it so it's tight, and I know all of my little ears are applying pressure. Like this one right here, just by the way it tightened, I can tell it's not where I want it to be. So I'm going to loosen it up. I'm going to push it down, turn it now. There we go. Now that one's doing what I want it to do. Down, down, down. I just got this one over here. Yep. So there you go. So now you can kind of watch it as I'm turning this. It's squeezing this down on top of the fuel tank and sealing it. And I like using an Allen wrench like this rather than one on a ratchet because I have a much better feel for how much pressure I'm putting on this thing. I don't want to break this thing and then have to wait a week to get another bolt or something. So, and then this way here I can just keep working it until I got it, you know, snug. And get them all about the same tightness, and I can feel my gasket compressed, and I don't have one side really squished up against the tank and the other side not down on it tight enough. So I'm pretty confident right now nothing's coming out of this tank from this area anyways. Do have to say, this truck with a supercharger on it, I don't know how far you're going with this much gas, but alright, so there she is right there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I got a plug for, I got a little spot on here that says return, it says vent, but I also have a regular vent that's in the tank, so I'm going to take and I'm going to plug that return, and I'm also have, this is my actual pump fitting where my fuel is going to come out, and I'm going to run a hard line. I like running hard lines, so I'm going to run a hard line from the pump out over into the frame rail where I'm going to pipe into a fuel filter, which is also got a flare fitting on it, and then a flare coming out the other way. I'm going to run steel all the way from here, all the way up to the firewall. From the firewall out to the throttle body, I'll run a flexible line. This way here, I pretty much never have to worry about any degradation of the line underneath the vehicle at all. And when I want to change a fuel filter, yeah, I'm going to need a wrench, but it's a nice positive connection. I don't have to worry about, dry rotting or anything like that underneath. So and especially this fuel pump's going to push about 60 psi, and if, let's say, you had a hose that degraded and got a crack in it, next thing you know, you're spurting fuel out underneath your vehicle at 60 psi where your exhaust system, everything is. I don't need to tell you, I don't want to be involved in that. So I like to run a hard line and be done with it. So I'm going to get this all set up, and next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back up inside the vehicle, and we're going to work on piping my steel fuel line all the way up to the front. So stay tuned. Okay, so now I got my sending unit in my fuel tank. My fuel tank is now mounted in the truck. I'm going to bring the handheld camera over. I'll show you the setup I got. I made a wiring harness that come off of that fuel pump and ran it along the frame rail with a plug-in connection. I'll have to tie it into the main electrical system once I get to that point. And then I'm going to have to, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run my hard fuel line off of the top of that fuel tank sending unit or pump unit and down the frame rail to the front. So I'm going to get the handheld. I'll show you what we got going on. Okay, so here's our frame. So all right, so here's our fuel tank. It's up mounted into the area. Here's where I capped off my my original fuel that was in here. Now my pump's on the inside. You can see the straps where it's bolted on here. It mounts up in here pretty nicely. And then this is the wiring harness that I made. It comes across the back of the frame and then drops down over here. This is a feed wire here that I originally had for the other fuel pump. Drop this down and I'll show you the top of the fuel tank and how we're going to run the fuel line. Okay, so this is my fuel pump that I put in the top of the tank. You can see my wiring harness comes down. It goes to the frame rail. And then this fitting right here where my finger is, that's going to be where my fuel line goes in. And I'm going to run that across and over to the frame rail and down to the front. And then here, if you look upwards, this is the steel line coming off of the tank. It's coming along and it's running up here along the frame rail like this. It comes along here like this, and this is an inline fuel filter that I hard plumbed in, and then my line comes down like that, and it follows this frame rail right on down here like this, and then you can see it comes up over here. Alright folks, so I'm ready to call it a day. Today we kind of recap. We put the pump in the tank, we get the tank cleaned, we got it prepped, we got a wiring harness made to come off of the fuel pump, we put the fuel tank back in the vehicle, we got a wiring harness run, and we ran a fuel line, a hard fuel line from the fuel pump all the way up to the firewall area. I'm right up to here with it. What I'm going to do is I'll terminate it up here, and then from the firewall area to the throttle body will be a flexible line.